The moment that stopped him cold it was a Thursday evening at the Google headquarters in Mountain View. The sky outside had turned soft gray, shadows long and stretched across the floors of the near-empty offices. Most employees had already left. Their laptops shut, desk chairs pushed in, and coffee cups rinsed and abandoned in the kitchen sink. The silence of the building was a rare thing. Only a few dim ceiling lights remained on, casting a faint glow on the glass walls and polished tiles. In this stillness, Sundar Pichai walked the halls alone. He had stayed late reviewing strategy reports, something he often did when he needed space to think. But tonight wasn't about data or performance curves. Something weighed on him, something deeper. He wasn't quite sure what it was yet, but it tugged at him like a loose thread. His shoes echoed as he walked down the quiet corridor on the lower level. It was a floor rarely visited by executives, a utility zone filled with maintenance rooms, supply closets, and access to the building's service systems. Sundar had come down looking for a misplaced tech prototype, but what he found instead would haunt him. He passed the janitor's closet, the door slightly ajar. He paused. From within, he heard the hum of a fluorescent light and the faint sound of breathing. Curious, he leaned in and gently pushed the door open. What he saw made him freeze. Inside, a woman in a gray uniform was curled up on the toilet seat, fast asleep. Her knees were pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them like a child afraid of the dark. Her head leaned against the tiled wall, and she wore a name tag that read Rosa. Beside her, a mop bucket stood untouched, cleaning rags folded on a small cart. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a paper towel, forgotten. Sundar stepped back instinctively, unsure what to do. He stood there, silent, frozen not just by surprise, but by something else, something heavier. Shame, guilt, discomfort. A wave of realization swept over him. In a company bursting with innovation, luxury, and privilege, this woman had nowhere to rest but a bathroom. He looked around. The janitor's closet had no window, no fan, just the hum of that tired light above her. This was where she took her break, where she closed her eyes on a toilet. He turned to leave, but his footsteps made a soft scuff. The woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She blinked a few times, disoriented, then quickly sat upright. "I'm sorry," she said quickly in broken English. "I just sit for a moment. Only 5 minutes." Sundar stepped forward slowly. "No, it's okay. I didn't mean to startle you." She stood up, smoothing her uniform. She looked embarrassed, as though being caught sleeping was worse than stealing. "I go back to work," she said, reaching for the mop. "Wait," Sundar said softly. "You don't have to. Are you okay?" She hesitated. "Yes, sir. I just tired. Long day." Sundar studied her face. There were lines carved deep into her skin, the kind that came not with age but with struggle. Her eyes told stories. She didn't speak. "How long have you worked here?" he asked gently. She looked down. 3 years, night shift. Clean all floors." He nodded. "Do you get breaks?" She looked up quickly, unsure if it was a trick question. "Yes, sometimes." 10 minutes. He frowned. 10 minutes. "For the whole night?" "Yes. But it's okay. I need this job." His heart sank deeper. He felt his throat tighten, the kind of heaviness that didn't come from fatigue, but from knowing he'd been blind to someone else's pain. He stepped into the closet fully, closing the door gently behind him. He didn't want anyone else to hear this moment. It felt sacred, somehow. "Rosa," he said softly, Would you like to have dinner with me?" She stared at him like he'd spoken a different language. Her mop handle clattered to the floor. "Dinner?" She repeated, eyes wide. "Yes," he said, nodding. "I'm not joking. I was just about to get some food." "I'd be honored if you joined me." Her face flushed, unsure if it was confusion, fear, or disbelief. "Why?" She whispered. "Because you matter," he said simply. Silence stretched between them. She looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Come," he said. We'll go somewhere nice and talk, if that's okay with you. She looked down at her shoes, then back up. I'm dirty. I smell like bleach. I can't go with you. He smiled gently. I don't care about that. A long pause. Then, slowly, nervously, she nodded Dot, and just like that, everything changed. Sundar waited outside the janitor's closet as Rosa quickly washed her face and combed her hair in the staff restroom. He could hear water running, the squeak of a faucet, the rustle of paper towels. It felt strange, standing there, an executive outside a janitor's bathroom, waiting for someone no one ever noticed. Dot, finally. She stepped out, clutching a small worn purse. Her uniform was still the same, her shoes scuffed, but there was a dignity in how she carried herself now. She didn't smile, not yet, but her eyes were no longer downcast. They walked side by side to the underground parking. Not a word was said. Sundar didn't press. Rosa didn't explain. Silence carried them. Dot as they drove through city lights. Sundar glanced over at her. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers twitching slightly. How long have you lived here? He asked. 12 years, she said. Came from Honduras. My husband passed. I raised 2 kids. How old are they? 11 and 8. They sleep now. My neighbor watches them at night. I work. He nodded. Do they know you work here? She shrugged. And they think I clean houses. They don't know about toilets or trash. I want them to dream bigger. His throat tightened again. What do you want for them? Her answer came instantly. College, safety, something better than this. They pulled into a quiet family restaurant, one Sundar used to visit before fame made simple outings complicated. The staff greeted him warmly. He asked for a quiet booth in the back. Rosa looked around, her eyes wide. I'd never been here before. Too expensive. He smiled. Tonight you're my guest. They sat, and as the menus were placed before them, Rosa fumbled with hers, unsure what to choose. Take your time, Sundar said gently. Or we can ask the chef to surprise us. She nodded. I like that. As the food came, the conversation deepened. Rosa spoke of the journey from Honduras, the fear of crossing borders, the cold nights in shelters, the factory job she lost during COVID, and how the janitor position at Google saved her life, even if it paid little. She never asked who Sundar was. Not once. She didn't seem to know. Or maybe she did and didn't care. And that moved Sundar more than anything. Because, for once, he wasn't Sundar Pichai, the CEO. He was just a man sitting across from a woman who had been invisible for too long. And that was the moment the idea began to form in his mind. An idea that would change her life. Forever. But before he could say anything, his phone buzzed. He looked down. An emergency at the office. Someone had accessed internal systems. Security. Breach. His face grew serious. Rosa noticed. Everything okay? He nodded. Just ... something at work. I may need to head back for a bit. She looked disappointed but didn't say so. He quickly flagged the waiter. Can you pack this up for her? She's taking it home. Then he turned to Rosa. Listen, I'll send a car for you. Tomorrow night. Same time. We're not done talking. She blinked. You sure? Positive. He said as he walked her to the car. He paused. Rosa, he said softly. Thank you for trusting me. She looked up at him, her eyes shining for the first time. Thank you for seeing me. She whispered. And then the car door shut. And Sundar stood in the cold night air, heart pounding. He had no idea that what he had just begun would soon lead to headlines, investigations, betrayals, and a revelation so powerful it would shake Silicon Valley to its core. But for now, all he could think about was that woman on the toilet. And the way she had changed everything. Asterisk the crack. Beneath the marble floors following morning, the sun rose over Silicon Valley with its usual golden indifference, casting light onto glass towers and sprawling campuses filled with ideas and ambition. At Google headquarters, the day began with the familiar buzz of executives in suits, engineers in hoodies, and product managers carrying half-finished lattes. It was business as usual. Deadlines, meetings, whiteboards full of diagrams and dreams. But for Sundar Pichai, everything had changed. He stood in front of his office window, staring down at the campus, eyes distant, coffee untouched on his desk. Last night wasn't just a chance encounter. It had stirred something deep inside him, something that didn't have a slide on a PowerPoint presentation or a bullet point in a mission statement. The image of Rosa, curled up in the janitor's closet, still haunted him. In the grand vision of innovation and progress, how had someone like her become invisible? How had he, the CEO of one of the world's most influential companies, failed to see her for 3 whole years? He turned away from the window and walked slowly to his desk, picking up his phone. He scrolled through the directory until he found what he was looking for. "Danny," he said when his chief of staff answered, "I want you to pull me a full report on all our janitorial contracts. Who hires them, what they're paid, the shift, schedules, everything." There was a pause. "Yeah, that's a little unusual, Sundar. May I ask why?" "Because I'm finally asking myself something I should have asked a long time ago," he said quietly. "How are the people who clean? Our floors treated? Got it. I'll get on it right away." As he hung up, his thoughts drifted back to Rosa. The way she held her purse tightly as though someone might take it. The way she had apologized for sleeping on the toilet, as though rest was a privilege she didn't deserve. He couldn't shake. The feeling that his company, for all its forward-thinking culture and global impact, had missed something fundamental. Humanity. That evening, true to his word, Sundar sent a sleek black car to Rosa's apartment in East San Jose. The neighborhood was quiet but worn down, buildings leaning tiredly against one another, paint peeling from walls that had seen too many summers. Kids played barefoot near cracked sidewalks, laughter bouncing off rusty fences. Rosa stepped out of the building nervously, wearing a modest blue dress and a cardigan 2 sizes too big. She had taken special care tonight, combing her hair back neatly, dabbing on a bit of lipstick, and borrowing shoes from her neighbor. She looked unsure as she approached the car, but when the driver opened the door and addressed her by name, she smiled faintly. And the restaurant tonight was different, not fancy, but warm. It was a little family-run Ethiopian place Sundar loved, the kind where the spices danced in the air and no one asked what you did for a living. Sundar was already waiting at a corner table when Rosa arrived. She looked around cautiously as she entered, as if afraid someone might laugh at her. When she spotted him, she let out a breath of relief. He stood and greeted her with a soft smile. "You look beautiful." "Rosa," he said genuinely. She blushed and shook her head. "I almost didn't come. I thought maybe you forget." "Never," he said. "I've been thinking about you all day." She sat down slowly, still unsure how to carry herself in this unfamiliar world of linen napkins and table candles. "How was work?" "Yes, same," she said. Floor 5 had coffee spilled all over. Someone broke a mug and left glass, but I cleaned it. He listened, really listened, and then asked the question no one ever asked her. "How do you feel when you clean?" She paused. "Tired," she said at first, then looked down. But ... "Proud. It's honest work. I see my reflection in the clean tiles. Sometimes that's all I get to see of myself." His chest ached. So much wrapped in so few words. They ate, slowly savoring every bite and every moment. Sundar shared a bit about his life growing up in Chennai, how he used to sleep on the floor with his brother, how they didn't have a refrigerator until he was 12. Rosa listened, wide-eyed. "You," she whispered, "you slept on the floor?" He nodded. "For many years we had very little. But my mother... she always made it feel like enough." Rosa smiled, and for the first time laughed softly. "My mother too. She used to tell me clean hands can build anything. I never forgot that." Sundar felt his heart twist. What happened to her? "She passed when I was 17. She got sick. We had no money for medicine." The table grew quiet. "I'm sorry," Sundar said. Rosa waved her hand gently. "That's life. We all have storms. I just try to keep standing." As they finished dinner, Rosa asked a question that surprised him. "Who are you really?" She said. He blinked. "I mean, People look at you in the restaurant. Even the driver called you, sir, like you're someone important. He chuckled softly. I'm Sundar. Yes, she said. But what do you do? He paused. I work in technology, he said carefully. I help lead the company where you clean. Her eyes widened. You're the boss, he nodded slowly. The boss, he smiled. Yes. She stared at him, stunned. Double quotes, but ... Why me? Why talk to me? He leaned forward. Because yesterday, when I saw you sleeping in that closet, something inside me broke. Not because you were doing something wrong, but because I was blind to the people who hold up this company with their hands and their silence. I can't fix the world, Rosa. But I can start by not ignoring it. Her eyes shimmered. She didn't speak. She just reached across the table and placed her hand on his dot, and in that moment, a connection formed that was deeper than words, built not on position or power, but on shared pain, and the decision to see each other the next morning. Sundar stepped into the executive boardroom with fire in his chest as the directors and senior leaders settled in. Sundar remained standing. Before we begin, he said, I want to talk about something we've ignored for too long. A few glances exchanged around the table. We pride ourselves on changing the world with our technology. But what about the people who change our trash bins, scrub our toilets, and clean the spaces where we dream? How are we helping them? One of the VPS cleared his throat. Are you referring to the janitorial staff? Yes, Sundar said. And not just ours. I want a company-wide review of every outsourced contract, every cleaning vendor, and every dollar we spend, not just to save money, but to ask, are we paying people enough to live with dignity? Another director frowned. Sundar, with all due respect, that's not our core mission. He looked at her sharply. Then maybe it should be. The room fell silent. We say we care about impact. Well, here's our chance to prove it, not just through code, but through compassion. A few heads nodded. Double quotes. I met someone, he continued. A woman who cleans our building every night. She sleeps in the janitor's closet because she's too exhausted to stand. She's been working here for 3 years, and not once has any. Oda said thank you. He paused. That changes today. Across town, Rosa sat in her small apartment, her children still asleep, holding the leftover meal he had sent her home with. She opened the box, the warmth still clinging to the rice. As she took a bite, her eyes filled with tears. Not from the food, but from something she hadn't tasted in a long time. Hope. Later that week, the media caught wind of a mysterious shift at Google. Whispers spread about an internal restructuring, focused on support staff, increased wages, break rooms being upgraded. Janitorial staff offered benefits and transportation allowances. And in the middle of it all, Sundar stood silently, offering no public statement yet, just working quietly behind the scenes. But in private, he knew something bigger was coming, because what he didn't know, what Rosa hadn't told him yet, was that her story went deeper than a mop bucket and late night shifts. Much deeper. And soon, the whole world would find out. The woman with the missing the yesterday morning rolled in slowly, with soft sunlight slipping past the curtains of Sundar's quiet home. He sat on his balcony with a cup of black tea, steam curling into the air, watching the trees sway gently in the California breeze. But his mind wasn't on the view. It was somewhere else entirely, on a woman most of the world had never heard. Rosa. Her story still echoed inside him like a song with no end. Every word she spoke, every tired breath, had unearthed something that wouldn't go quiet. And even now, days later, he couldn't stop thinking about how many more Rosas there might be, how many unseen, unheard, forgotten lives existed beneath the glossy surface of the tech world. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over contact. Then he tapped. Rosa, he said when she answered, her voice quiet, unsure. I was wondering if I could see you today. No fancy dinners, just talk. She hesitated. Okay, but not tonight. I work later. He looked at the time. What about now? I can come to you. Now. She sounded surprised. Yes. I'll bring coffee. A pause. Then, gently. Okay. He arrived an hour later in a modest neighborhood tucked behind a gas station and a line of old apartment blocks. The buildings were faded and cracked in places. Clotheslines stretched across balconies, children's bikes resting crookedly near. Staircases. Rosa opened the door to her unit cautiously. Wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, her hair tied back with a blue scarf. Her face was bare, free from any performance, and for the first time, Sundar saw her as she was, a mother, a woman, and a survivor. "Sorry it's small," she said as he stepped inside. "And messy." But it wasn't. The apartment was clean, modest. Yes, but filled with little touches of life. A handmade drawing on the fridge. A cracked photo frame with a picture of her children. A small altar tucked in the corner with a candle and a rosary. "You have a beautiful home," Sundar said, meaning it. She smiled faintly. "Thank you." They sat at the kitchen table. The surface had scratches and the chairs wobbled a little. But it was real and warm and far more honest than any boardroom. "I wanted to ask you something," Sundar said gently. "But only if you're comfortable." She nodded slowly. "I'd like to know more about your life before you came here. Before Google." Before all this, her eyes clouded. She looked down at her hands. The silence stretched long between them. Sundar didn't interrupt. Finally, she spoke. "My real name isn't Rosa." He blinked. "What?" "It's Isabella. Isabella Morales." He leaned back slightly, letting the name settle. "Why did you change it?" She hesitated. "I didn't want to be found." Those 6 words struck harder than anything she had said before. "Who's looking for you?" He asked softly. "Not." "Who?" she whispered. "What?" Her voice trembled as she began to speak. "I was a teacher," she said, "back in Honduras. I taught math to little children. I loved it. My husband worked at the local hospital. We had a small house, a garden. We were happy." She paused, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "Then one day, my husband, he refused to let a gang member cut in line at the hospital. He told him to wait. The next morning, he was gone. I found him ... in a ditch. No one did anything. The police were scared." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't stop. "They came for me next, said I needed to pay for his mistake. I ran, grabbed my kids, and fled that night with only a backpack. We crossed rivers, walked through the desert. I saw things on that journey I can't forget." Her voice cracked. "And when we finally reached America, I thought we were safe. But I didn't have papers, no social, no one would hire me. So I changed my name. Rosa was easy, forgettable." Sundar sat in stunned silence. Everything about her quiet strength, her careful speech, the way she carried herself, it all made sense now. She wasn't just a janitor. She was someone who had outrun death, who had protected her children with every breath, who had rebuilt. A life from ashes. He swallowed hard. "Isabella," he said slowly, deliberately using her real name. "You don't have to hide anymore." Her eyes met his. "But if I don't, I could be sent back." "I won't let that happen," he said firmly, but inside. He knew the truth. There were limits even to what he could protect. Over the next few days, Sundar threw himself into action. He assigned a small, trusted team to quietly research immigration, legal support. He met with human rights lawyers, community advocates, and nonprofit leaders. Each conversation opened his eyes wider. The system was brutal. Even now, Isabella was at risk. One wrong move, one routine check, and she could lose everything. Her job, her apartment, her kids. And yet she kept working, night after night, pushing. That mop, carrying that bucket, folding her exhaustion into silence. Meanwhile, Sundar's internal reforms had begun rippling through the company. Vendors were being audited. Wages increased. Rest areas upgraded. People started noticing. But then the questions started coming. An internal leak had reached the media. A whisper turned into a murmur. Why was the CEO of Google suddenly spending so much time with a janitor? What was going on? Blogs speculated. Reddit. Threads popped up. Someone posted a grainy photo of him walking her to the car. The gossip swirled like wildfire. And then came the article. And Anonymous source inside the company fed a tech publication with the headline, "Who is the mystery woman changing Google's CEO?" The article included unverified claims, a scandalous tone, questions about favoritism, innuendos about motives. Sundar was furious not just because of the intrusion, but because the media had done what society always did, reduced a woman's worth to suspicion the moment she stepped into the light. He called Isabella immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "I saw it," she said softly. "My neighbor showed me. Are you okay?" "I'm used to people making stories," she said. "But I worry for my kids." He felt helpless, exposed, angry. But Isabella? She remained calm. "They don't know me," she said. "They don't know what I've survived." Sundar realized that she wasn't afraid of public shame. She was afraid of being sent back to a place where shame was the least of her worries. That night, he sat alone in his home office, surrounded by silence and shadows. He opened an email from the legal team. It was possible, they said, but difficult. Her asylum claim could be reopened under humanitarian grounds. But it would require public exposure, documentation, testimony. In other words, she would have to tell the world her story. Sundar stared at the screen. Then, slowly, he typed a reply. "I want to meet with her tomorrow. Both of us, together, we make this decision as a team." He hit send and leaned back. He knew this would be a turning point. A fork in the road. But what he didn't know was that someone was watching. In a quiet corner of the city. A man sat in a dark room, scrolling through images. Paused on the photo of Sundar and Rosa. He zoomed in, then smirked. "So you finally showed up again." He said softly. On the screen was her face. A face he hadn't seen in over a decade. He picked up the phone. "I found her," he whispered. "Isabella Morales. And miles away, in her tiny apartment." She stood at the window, unaware that her past had just caught up with her. Asterisk ghost behind the curtain tonight. Air was unusually still when Isabella stepped out onto her apartment balcony, a mug of warm cinnamon tea in her hands. She watched the streetlights flicker against the cracked sidewalks, the soft shuffle of an old man dragging a shopping cart down the alley. Everything felt quieter than usual. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something. Invisible, but undeniable. Her children were asleep in the room behind her, curled up together beneath a blanket that had once belonged to her mother. It still smelled faintly of lavender. She'd made them hot chocolate earlier, tucked them in, kissed their foreheads. But even as she smiled at them, her chest had tightened. She could sense something coming, like the way animals know when a storm is near, even before the sky turns dark. She didn't know that hundreds of miles away, a man named Salvador Mendoza had spoken her name aloud for the first time in years. She didn't know that her face was now on a computer screen beside her old immigration case file, or that someone had already begun connecting the dots. She had spent years trying to erase, but she did know this. The world never let you stay hidden. Forever. The next morning, Sundar stood in the lobby of a law firm that specialized in asylum cases and immigration protections. Beside him sat Isabella, holding a small folder of documents with trembling hands. Inside were the few things she still had from her old life: her Honduran teaching certificate, a photograph of her wedding day, and a yellowed newspaper clipping about a doctor who had been murdered outside a hospital gate. That doctor had been her husband. A paralegal led them to a small galled room where a lawyer named Maya Jennings greeted them. She was sharp-eyed, kind-voiced, and dressed in a gray suit that looked like it had seen many long, difficult cases. "Isabella," Maya said gently, extending her hand. "I've read what Mr. Pichai shared. Thank you for coming." Isabella shook her hand carefully. Still unsure of the world she had stepped into, Maya sat down and opened a thick file. "We've reviewed your background," she said. "Your original entry was undocumented, but your circumstances fall under the new humanitarian protections. If we move quickly, we may be able to file a motion to reopen your case and seek a stay of removal. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible." "What would I have to do?" Isabella asked quietly. "You have to come forward, publicly, tell your story." Possibly testify. That's the strongest way to build your case. Isabella looked down, her voice small. But the people who hurt me, they might still be out there. Maya nodded solemnly. Yes. That's the risk. Can't we do it? Quietly? Isabella asked. No names, no interviews. That's the weaker path, Maya admitted. Judges respond to truth, but also to pressure. Publicity can be protection. Hiding ... doesn't offer that. Sundar spoke up. You wouldn't be alone, he said. I'd be with you. Every step. Isabella turned to him, her eyes filled with questions he couldn't answer. Why? She whispered. Why are you helping me like this? I'm just ... a cleaner. No, he said, his voice firm. You're not. You're a human being. And when someone is drowning in silence, you don't ask why, they just deserve to be heard. A long silence followed. Then Isabella nodded. Slowly. Okay, she said. I'll do it. The plan moved forward quickly. Maya's team prepared the paperwork while Sundar arranged a quiet meeting with one of his trusted media contacts, a journalist named Leila Fernandez. Leila had a reputation for compassion and depth. She wasn't interested in gossip. She listened. They met at a quiet cafe off Mission Street. Isabella sat across from Leila, her hand shaking as she took a deep breath. You can ask me anything, she said, her voice low. And for the first time in years, she spoke the full truth. Her life as a teacher, her husband's murder, the threats, the escape, the desert, the shelter, the night she cried in motel rooms with her kids asleep beside her, the fear, the shame, and then starting over the mop, the toilet, the forgotten name. As Leila listened, she wiped tears from her eyes and didn't hide them. When the interview ended, Leila reached across the table and took Isabella's hand. Thank you, she said. You're brave. 3 days later, story went live. The headline read, The woman behind the mop, Isabella. Morales breaks her silence. The article wasn't sensational. It was poetic, raw, human. And within hours, it exploded. Tweets, shares. ASTADS. We are. ISBEO began trending. People who had once ignored the faces behind cleaning carts were suddenly paying attention. Other janitors, housekeepers, and undocumented workers began posting their own stories. A movement was stirring, not out of pity, but respect. But not everyone welcomed it. In a darkened office in Tijuana, Salvador Mendoza read the article with a tight jaw. He leaned back, swirling a glass of dark rum. The photo of Isabella, older now, but unmistakable, stared back at him from the screen. So, he muttered, she's alive. He picked up his phone. I need you to find someone, he told the man on the other end. She's in California. Name's changed. But it's her. You sure it's worth it? The voice replied. She knows things, Salvador growled. Things that could destroy people. He didn't say who. Because Salvador wasn't just an ex-gang enforcer. He was now a quiet investor in a chain of security companies that had government contracts. He'd scrubbed his past clean, but if Isabella spoke publicly, and really spoke, everything could crumble. He hung up and walked to the window, his mind spinning. You should have stayed hidden, he muttered. Back in San Jose, Isabella walked her children to school. People waved at her now. Some stopped her and thanked her for her courage. Others gave her flowers. The spotlight had been terrifying, but it had also brought warmth. Yet, she could feel something else lurking beneath it all. Attention. A pull. One evening, she returned home to find her mailbox open, even though she hadn't checked it that day. Inside was a single envelope. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. Photo of her and her children walking home. Taken from behind. No words. Just proof that someone had been watching. She stood frozen. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled. Then she tore the photo in half. That same night, Sundar was in a strategy meeting on his phone. Buzzed. It was a SBELA. He excused himself and stepped out into the hallway. Hello? He answered. Her voice was tight. Scared. Someone's watching me, she said. His body went cold. What? There was a picture in my mailbox of me and the kids. He didn't hesitate. I'm sending security to your building. Now. You're not staying there tonight. Pack a bag. I'll come myself. But no, he said, firmly. No more hiding. Within the hour, Isabella and her children were moved into a secure guest house owned by one of Google's private properties, unlisted, gated, and safe. Sundar stood with her as the security details swept the area. Professional and quiet. I'm sorry, he said as she sat on the sofa. Hugging your children. Don't be, she whispered. This isn't your fault. It's mine. For speaking, he crouched beside her. No, he said. It's his fault. And we're going to end this. Her eyes met his. You really believe that? I have to, he said. Because if we let fear win now, then everything you've done means nothing. And I won't let that happen. Outside, a black car sat idling 2 blocks away. Inside. A man held a phone to his ear. She's being protected. He said on the other end. Salvador's voice was like ice. Then wait. Everyone slips eventually. He ended the call and stared at the photo of Isabella once more. She had taken everything from him once. He wouldn't let her do it. Again. Asterisk, the weight of silence. Sundar stood alone in the guest house kitchen, staring at the dim glow of the microwave clock. It was 2:03 a.m., but sleep felt like a foreign concept. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful, it was tense, like the hush before thunder. Through the walls, he could hear Isabella's children breathing softly in their sleep. The image of her holding them on the sofa earlier still burned in his mind, her body curled protectively around their small frames, as if willing her own presence to be armor. But armor wasn't enough anymore. He reached for his phone and scrolled. Through the photos Leila Fernandez had sent him after the article, there was one that struck him more than the rest. It was a candid shot taken just after the interview, when Isabella had stood outside the cafe with her eyes closed, sunlight falling on her face and the faintest smile at the corner of her lips. She looked free. For the first time, she looked unafraid. And now it was all crumbling. He tapped on his contacts and called Maya Jennings. The lawyer. It's late, her sleepy voice answered. I know. But we need to accelerate everything, Sundar said. Whoever's after her. They've started making moves, Maya sighed. We're doing all we can. But unless she's willing to testify in court, to publicly name names, we're building this with one hand tied behind our back. Sundar's voice was low. Then we'll untie it. In the morning, Isabella sat with Sundar on the patio of the guest house. The sun rose behind the hills, casting golden stripes through the iron railing. She wore one of his assistant's spare hoodies and sipped warm tea in silence. The moment felt surreal, like they were two people trying to play normal in a world that was no longer safe. How long do I have to stay here? She finally asked. Until we know you're protected, Sundar said gently. And if I never am? He looked at her. Then we make you unbreakable. She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said. But it's possible. She turned her face to the wind. I hate that I'm scared again. For years, I learned how to walk through life invisible. I thought if I just kept my head down, worked hard, smiled, they'd forget me. I just wanted to survive. But now, he said, you're not just surviving. You're changing lives. She looked at him, her eyes tired. But at what cost? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. This came from Maya this morning, he said, handing it to her. She unfolded it slowly. It was an official court document notice of intent to schedule an asylum hearing. Her name was on it. Her real name? She stared at it, the words blurring. It's happening, he said. You're being heard. By midday, the house was buzzing with quiet preparation. Sundar had arranged for a private meeting between Isabella and a federal investigator, who specialized in witness protection. If her testimony could reveal corruption or criminal ties, the government could offer legal support and possibly expedite her case. But it required her to give up more than just her story. It meant facing Salvador and naming him. She sat at the edge of the couch, knees pressed together, fingers knotted tightly in her lap. You don't have to do this, Sundar told her. We can find another way. But she shook her head. No, if I keep hiding. The meeting took place in a secured office near Palo Alto, far from the public eye. Isabella entered the building flanked by two plainclothes security agents. Her steps slow but steady. Inside, a tall man with a buzz cut and gentle eyes introduced himself as Agent Carter. He offered her water. She declined. Then, with a deep breath, she began to speak. She told them everything. The hospital incident, the threats, the extortion, the secret deals between the gang and certain security companies that paid for silence. Salvador's name, his operations. The night her husband was murdered. The voice on the phone that warned her to leave or watch her children die. Agent Carter listened, occasionally nodding, but never interrupting. By the end, she was shaking. I have no proof, she whispered. Just memories. You have more. Then you think, he said gently. We've been building a case for a while. Your story fits into a puzzle that's been missing one piece. Her eyes widened. You mean he's already under investigation? Yes, Carter said. But we needed someone who'd been on the inside, who saw it. You're that person. Isabella pressed her hands to her face. What happens now? She asked. We protect you. He said, and we prepare you. If you testify, we can use your statement to move forward, possibly press charges. And we can help you secure asylum, even citizenship. It's not fast. But it's real. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I'll do it. While Isabella stepped into a world of legal strategy and government promises, Sundar was facing his own storm. An internal board member had called for an emergency meeting. Concerns were being raised about his involvement with Isabella, about the optics, about the media storm. Some were worried about company reputation. Others were questioning his judgment. This is a personal matter, Sundar said calmly, standing at the head of the conference table. But I've ensured that it has not interfered with my responsibilities. A board member with silver hair and a stiff jaw leaned forward. But why her? He asked. Why risk so much for someone who, frankly, is not our concern? Sundar's expression didn't waver, because who we ignore says more about us than who we praise. Another board member spoke up. The media is framing it as a savior story. That's dangerous. They're painting you as some hero. I didn't do this to be a hero, Sundar said quietly. I did it because I saw someone who was being crushed by a system we've all benefited from, and I couldn't look away. Silence. Then someone muttered, well, let's hope it doesn't become a scandal. But outside that room, it already was. A second article had surfaced. This one less kind. Tabloids hinted at an affair. Political voices accused Sundar of pushing a woke agenda. Comments flooded social media, some praising, others condemning. But the worst blow came from a familiar name. Salvador Mendoza had released a video from an undisclosed location. He sat at a desk, suit crisp, smile cold. This woman, he said, holding up a printed screenshot of Isabella's photo, has fabricated stories to gain sympathy. She is not who she claims to be. She's hiding from the consequences of her actions. He ended with a threat disguised as a promise. Always comes out. Isabella saw the video. She watched it silently, eyes fixed on the screen. Her children were asleep in the next room. Sundar sat beside her, unsure what to say. After a long pause, she spoke. He still thinks he owns the truth. He's scared. Sundar said, he's trying to discredit you. Then we give them more than just my words, she said. What do you mean? She stood slowly, walked to the backpack she'd kept hidden in her closet for years. She pulled out a worn leather notebook, pages yellowed, corners bent. This was my husband's, she said. He kept records, names, dates, patient logs, and things he wasn't supposed to write down. She opened to a page near the back, scribbled notes about supply shortages. Undocumented transactions and one name circled twice. Salvador Mendoza. This, she whispered, is the piece you were missing? Sundar stared at the notebook, then back at her. This changes everything, he said, but outside, in the dark beyond the gated walls. A drone hovered, silent, watching, recording, and a figure in the shadows made a call. They have something. We need to act now. The storm and the light morning of the hearing arrived like a heavy silence before an earthquake thick, unspoken, waiting to shatter. The guest house, once a safe haven, had turned into a war room. Sundar sat at the edge of long oak. Table, laptop open but untouched, fingers locked tightly together. He hadn't slept, not really. Not since Isabella had revealed her husband's old notebook. Not since the drone was discovered just outside the perimeter fence the night before. Not since Agent Carter confirmed Salvador had likely fled the country again. Bela sat nearby, her face calm but pale. A stillness had taken over her in recent days, the kind of quiet that comes when a person has passed through fire and is still standing. She was no longer the woman sleeping on a toilet to steal moments of rest. She was now someone else entirely stronger. Slower to speak, eyes sharper, the notebook, scanned and authenticated, had triggered a chain reaction within federal agencies. Details matched long-closed investigations, and new links to Mendoza's network emerged. It wasn't just about Isabella anymore. Her testimony had unlocked doors that had been sealed with fear. Today, she would speak publicly, on record. Before a federal judge, and maybe, just maybe, the weight would begin to lift. As they drove toward the courthouse in a black SUV escorted by unmarked security vehicles. The city passed by in slow motion. Sundar looked out the window at the world that had so often distracted him with meetings. Screens, innovations, things that now felt hollow compared to the quiet bravery seated next to him. He turned to her. Are you sure you want to do this? She nodded without looking back. I wasn't sure before, but now I need to finish it. For my husband, for my children, for all the people like me who don't get this chance. He took a slow breath. You're not alone. She finally turned. To him, eyes soft. I know. The courthouse steps were crowded with journalists, activists, bystanders, and police barriers. Word had spread quickly after the article, after Salvador's video, after Sundar's sudden public stance. People wanted to see the woman who had somehow become the face of a quiet war. Others came to tear her down. Isabella stepped from the car. Her shoulders squared, her children watching from a nearby hotel with agents keeping them safe. Sundar followed, suit crisp, eyes steady. Flashes erupted as they walked toward the doors. Isabella, are you afraid to testify? Mr. Pichai, is this political? Is she your partner? Neither answered. Inside, the hall was cool, clean, and tense. They were led to a chamber on the third floor, a hearing room that looked far too small for what was about to happen. Maya was already waiting with Agent Carter. They approved a closed-door session, Maya whispered. Media is barred. It's just the judge, the interpreter, and the panel. This is our best chance. Isabella nodded. Then the doors opened. Inside. The room felt like a different universe, silent. Clinical, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Above, the judge, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, sat at the bench. 2 immigration officials and 1 federal observer flanked her. An interpreter stood nearby, though Isabella insisted on speaking for herself in English. Double quotes, Miss Morales. The judge began. You've requested an emergency asylum reconsideration under grounds of humanitarian threat and new evidence. Are you prepared to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Isabella said. You may begin. She stepped forward slowly, holding the notebook tightly in her hands. And then she began. She spoke of her childhood. The school where she taught. The morning she learned her husband was gone. The silence from the police. The letter slid under her door telling her she was next. She described the journey across borders, deserts, detention, nights in strange houses, jobs taken under different names. She recounted how she changed her name to Rosa. How she scrubbed toilets at night. How she told her children she cleaned houses, not offices, because she wanted them to dream. And then she opened the notebook. Page by page, she read the entries: financial irregularities, hidden suppliers, a doctor, her husband who knew too much, his refusal to keep quiet, the threats. And finally Mendoza. Named, documented, and circled. The judge leaned forward, taking notes. When Isabella finished, there was silence. Then Agent Carter stood. The Department of Justice confirms corroborating evidence matching Miss Morales' testimony. A sealed investigation is now reopened. We support her request for asylum and witness protection. The judge looked at Isabella. You risked everything to be here. This country owes you safety. I'm granting immediate protected status, effective today. Your citizenship petition will follow. Isabella's hands trembled. Thank you, she whispered. And then, for the first time since she fled across a border, she exhaled without fear. Afterward, the news broke. Headlines exploded. Janitor becomes whistleblower. Isabella Morales granted asylum. Sundar Pichai stands by immigrant hero in landmark case. The notebook that shook the system. But none of it mattered as much as the quiet knock on the guest house door. That evening. Her children rushed in. She hugged them tightly, kissed their foreheads, and held them longer than she ever had before. A week later, Sundar called a company-wide town hall. Thousands of Google employees tuned in. I want to speak plainly, he began, standing on the stage alone. Our strength is not just in algorithms or platforms. It's in people. And some of those people have cleaned our floors, emptied our trash, and gone unnoticed. He paused, but not anymore. He announced a new initiative: permanent employment, pathways for contract workers, full benefits, free legal assistance for undocumented employees in transition, and partnerships with nonprofits supporting migrant families. They called it Project Dignity, and it began with ISABEL as the months passed. Isabella settled into a new life. She no longer cleaned offices, but she didn't stop working. Instead, she became an advisor on Sundar's outreach team, helping design programs for people like her, quiet warriors with stories buried under uniforms. She gave talks. She visited shelters. She helped build bridges. And one evening, months later, Sundar invited her and her children to dinner, not in a restaurant, not at the office, but at his home. He cooked himself rice, lentils, warm flatb. She brought homemade tamales. They ate outside under the stars. No, she said as her kids played nearby. When you found me sleeping in that closet, I thought you might fire me. He chuckled. I almost fired myself. She laughed softly. Then grew quiet. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. He smiled gently. You changed me. They sat in silence for a while. Not the heavy kind. The peaceful kind. The kind that follows the storm. Asterisk.